maybe you can elaborate a little bit on why it's so easy for these drug companies to get patents in South Africa. Why are there no examinations of the paperwork that they're submitting?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I think what it comes down to is the practice that has developed here over the years. Now, in our patent law, we do have a provision which says that a patent shall be examined. We can quote you the section and so on and bore you with the legal details. But the practice that I think the South African Patent Office developed as a result of being an offshoot of the British colonial system, as it were, was that it would accept applications provided that they complied with the formalities. I think they saw that as a way of firstly accelerating the process of patent grant, but also it may have had to do with the fact that they didn't consider they had the capacity, the examining capacity, the technical skills to be able to do that. The situation is that some countries do allow that to happen. But I think the difficulty is that with the TRIPS agreement and patents being extended for up to 20 years, it's exaggerated the problem of people having patents over such a long period of time. And then having these open-ended sort of applications where you walk in, you put in your paperwork, and you get a patent, results in the fact that they just have patents for longer and in greater periods of time. And that's made it actually a lot easier for them. The South African authorities have been thinking about, as far as we know, having an examination system, but they've always stopped short of saying, well, it's going to be too expensive, it's not going to be possible to have the technical capacity to do it, and have left it at that. But that's not served the country well. I think that's the argument that many of us are making, and that is that even though there are those real problems and challenges of getting a good examining efficient system up to speed, the cost is too great to the public. The cost to people's health, to education, to various other, areas of life that are served by goods that are patented or copyrighted and so on, is too great, and that in fact, whatever the cost is, in fact, government should seriously be looking at changing the system. So that's what the advocacy for the examination system is about.
So just to add on the examination system as well, there's been a lot of backlash against South Africa being able to implement it. But it is in itself a money-making scheme. If you set up an examination system in the country, you can charge filing fees, you can charge kind of maintenance of patent fees, and you can make your money back. And that's the example that we've seen in India, who have a very good examination system in place, and it's now not only made its money back from the original outlay, but it's also making money for the country every year.
Well, now, Lotte, I'm going to bring it back to you. You're involved with the Treatment Action Campaign. Can you tell me what the organization is doing in regards to reforming the IP laws?
So the Treatment Action Campaign, together with Section 27 and MSF, have been campaigning for over 2 years for reform to South Africa's patent system. And in October last year, the Department for Trade and Industry released a draft policy which outlaid some plans for doing this reform. We carried out a host of public consultations, and we developed a comprehensive set of recommendations for the government in order to improve the policy and to base it on some of the things that have worked really well in different countries at the minute. And we've worked with partners in Brazil, India, China, and a host more countries to help influence the government and produce a really useful patent act that would be pro-access and support public health initiatives.
Well, you've mentioned quite a few countries there that you've worked with. How does South Africa measure in comparison to other developing countries when it comes to the drug patenting laws?
So currently, South Africa fits quite low down on the scale, essentially. We grant more patents than most developed or developing countries in the world. As a really nice example, in 1 year, South Africa granted 2,442 patents, whereas in a 5-year period, Brazil only granted 273. And Brazil is undergoing a reform process at the moment and is further ahead than South Africa. And look how much worse South Africa is doing. So, essentially, we're not doing very well, and worryingly, South Africa is granting 40% more pharmaceutical patents than even the EU and the US. on the identical applications. So we really need to be working to reform the law, and that's what this policy has been doing. That's what the DTI has set out to do, and it makes a whole lot of suggestions for how to improve the Patent Act to stop this level of excessive patenting. And countries like Brazil and like India, Argentina, Kenya, lots of countries are already using a range of the safeguards allowed to them in international law, and we've worked with partners from those countries to really help develop the South African law to work for people.
What do we need to do to help the reform of this law happen?
I think we need to move with the most almost non-negotiable thing is to move with speed, because we've had pretty bad laws for a long time that have not served us well. And it's not in our interest to have to delay it or to wait for another 6 months or another year and so on. We need to move with great expedition to ensure that the reform process continues. Now, the draft policy has got many good features. It's got some weaknesses, which I think a number of submissions have pointed out to Department of Trade and Industry, and those need to be debated, and we must learn from other countries, bringing international best practice and adopt those sort of measures. But I think the process going forward would be, once the DTI has taken note of the submissions that have been made by various interest groups and so on, then they will finalize a policy and get it approved by Cabinet. So it'll have to go back to Cabinet for approval. And then once Cabinet has approved, my understanding is that it would then go to the DTI and perhaps other departments as well, like Science and Technology, to develop what they call white papers, which is what starts the legislation process. So in other words, white papers will then feed into the legislative program. White papers will be published, they're called for comment, they will then be tabled in Parliament, and they will go through the various portfolio committees and other committees to consider and debate and so on.
If patent laws are lax in South Africa, how would this affect pharma in the rest of the world, or would it?
Yes, I'll give a short answer. I think the way it will affect pharmaceutical companies, of course, they will take a knock. They'll make less money because they won't get patents and monopolies that much more easily. But then look at the advantages that accrue from that. And the advantage simply lies in this fact that if you tighten up the laws, the patents that are granted are for genuine innovations, for discoveries and so on that are actually genuinely new and innovative and so on, right? And then that means that where there are minor innovations and so on, those don't get patents, and those goods become accessible to the public more readily. So I think that's the big advantage. And of course, they will have to take a knock and this is why they're fighting so hard to maintain, the old, outdated system, because it benefits them and it makes money for them.